Hi there everybody, I'm Philip Eitzen and thank you for tuning in to episode 252 of The Art of Procurement. And my guest on the show today is Cyrille Naux. Cyrille is Purchasing and Supply Chain Vice President at Shaky Brakes International. Now, Shaky Brakes is a multinational manufacturer of automotive brakes and brake components. I met Cyrille at the Ivalua NOW conference in Paris last month as he gave a keynote presentation about his company's procurement and supply chain transformation journey. It's one that is still underway. And we recorded the podcast shortly after Cyrille came off stage. Now, for Shaky Brakes, the first step to manage their spend was supplier consolidation. So they looked at reducing direct spend, and they actually did reduce their direct spend suppliers from 12,000 to 6,000, with an eventual goal actually all the way down at 2,000, and then indirect spend suppliers from 10,000 to 4,000. They've also taken a hardline approach to supplier master data cleansing and standardization, which has led to a much higher quality supplier database that they continue to work hard to maintain. And so in this conversation, Cyrille touches on the business objectives behind Shaky Brakes' supplier consolidation exercise, why they found it absolutely necessary to organizationally separate sourcing from procurement, how 100% spend insight is not the same as 100% spend under management, and then the priorities driving their best-of-breed technology infrastructure strategy. And so I began by asking Cyrille the question that I always ask, which is if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
I have to say that procurement found me.
Yeah.
Yes, because I come from a financial background and I've been operating all my careers in different plants, regions in finance. And then I joined Shaky Brakes at the carve-out, and then I would say 2.5 years I've been promoted to purchasing,
right,
and a member of the executive team of Shaky Brakes. So I think procurement found me.
Was it something that you look towards, or is it just an opportunity that came along and it was a function you haven't been in and thought, I'm interested to see what procurement is like, how purchasing is like?
Well, when you work into the automotive industry, I can't say that I was completely absent of any knowledge on procurement.
Yeah.
Shaky Brakes, 80% of the spend is purchased. So I have to say that I knew a lot about procurement before joining it. But to be very frank with you, when our new CEO came in with his new strategy, he definitely thought, I could be a good guy for leading the purchasing activities for Shaky Brakes, and it was an opportunity. I took it.
Could you share a little bit more about Shaky Brakes? Because I know a lot of the listeners to Art of Procurement may not be as familiar with who you are, and I'd love to give them that context for our conversation.
Well, Shaky Brakes is really a leading brakes manufacturer. We are in the automotive industry. We are doing disc brakes, drum brakes, and electromechanical parking brakes. The headquarters is in Eindhoven.
Okay.
It's a global company. We are everywhere where the automotive manufacturers are. I think it's quite common in the automotive industry, but we are in India, we are in Asia, in China, of course. 25 million vehicles are produced everywhere there. We have to be there. Europe, very strong market. North America and Latin America. Yeah,
that's one of the great things. So I've got some background in the automotive industry as well. One of the things I loved about automotive was that kind of multicultural, you got plants in lots of different locations. Well, it adds a lot of complexity to the business, but I think it's really interesting as well to work in. It's a lot faster paced than some other industries that you can work in.
Well, definitely. I have to say when I started my career, I wanted two things. I wanted to work on very tangible things. So I think automotive is it's
when
very
you see the
tangible.
car driving down the road and you can see what impact you had on that vehicle is really rewarding.
And I wanted to work international. So I think this is where I started, and I feel very happy working in the automotive industry.
I wonder if you could share a little bit more about the transformation journey at Shaky Brakes. So what was the burning platform behind deciding? I think we were talking before we went on mic. It was about 2015 you started your change journey. What was the impetus for that change journey?
Well, this change was completely driven by the arrival of a new CEO. He decided that this company is going to be a growth success. And the main message that if we don't grow, we shrink.
Yeah.
And shrinking in the automotive industry cannot be.
Yes.
And so we built up a Rise 2020 strategy, which aims was to be somehow a 2 billion company coming from a 0.8 million company. Yeah. So it was a huge planning.
Right.
And we are there.
Really?
We have already a plan to reach the 2 billion. We wanted to be a successful company, so profit was important. Yeah. We wanted to be a 2-digit EBITDA. And somehow when you say those items, and when you have 80% of your spend, 80% of your sales, which is purchase, you cannot reach a 2-digit EBITDA without having a strong and global purchasing organization. So that was exactly the start of the journey. 2015. Then my CEO told me, "Well, do you want this challenge?" I say, "Why not?"
Yeah.
And this is where it started.
When you looked at that, was you coming from both a direct materials and an indirect, services perspective? So you're looking at the entire purchasing,
yes,
and all products and service that were purchased.
Yes, I mean the chassis brakes. Of course, we are buying. Somehow, when you are invoicing 1 billion, we are buying for 800 million. I would say 600 of it is direct, 200 of it is indirect. Yeah. The topics is a little bit, it's very different if you talk indirect and direct, because the direct spend is very structured. You have open PO, you have scheduling agreements. It's very clear. You have a bill of material. It's very clear. Indirect is far more complex.
Yeah, that's what I found in automotive. So my personal background was I sat on the direct side in automotive and then went into the indirect side. And you have that mandate somewhat on the direct side. In the indirect side, it's a lot more difficult. But even though you have the spend management culture in an automotive manufacturing firm because you do it on the direct, it's not easy to translate that into the indirect side of spend.
Exactly. I mean, those are two different animals.
Yeah.
And it has to be tackled in two different ways, and I think this is what we've been doing.
When you were doing it, did you find that you were moving people between direct and indirect?
Well, that's something we've been trying to do in terms of resources.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. I think the typical purchasing guy in indirect is a little bit more bargaining style, less somehow structured than the one on direct. And we've been moving a lot of people from the direct purchasing because we like their way of thinking and their structure into the indirect. We've been doing that a lot.
To try and bring some structure to the purchasing of indirect.
Exactly.
I know we're here at Ivalua NOW, and you had the opportunity to keynote a session earlier this morning about the transformation journey. And you shared within that presentation 5 different pillars that you focused on for your successful transformation. I just wonder if you could share a little bit more about what those pillars were.
Well, yes. So the first thing is, talking about purchasing, it's talking about of suppliers. And one of the pillars is being supplier focused. And it's a big words, but at the end, being supplier focused, it's not easy doing.
Right.
Because you need to have the right communications toward your supplier. You need to be able to communicate all your data, because purchasing is data.
Yeah.
And so being supplier focused, it's also very difficult when you have inherited for close to 12,000 suppliers. It's very difficult to be supplier focused. Why? Because we have an organization and which is limited.
Yeah.
Because we want to be profitable.
Right.
And at the end, you cannot be very supplier focused with 12,000 suppliers.
Yeah.
So we said we want to be global. So we want to use our resources globally, and we want to strategize on the supplier base on a global basis. So we want 80% of a supplier base to be global.
And they have the ability to supply you globally as well.
And they have the ability to supply us globally. And also we have to reduce, and this is something, a journey that we are through. We wanted to reduce by more than 50% the supply base. We inherited from 12,000 suppliers.
Yeah.
We are today somehow close to below 5,000.
Right.
And my ultimate target is to be below 2,000. So it's going to be a drastic move. But I think with a supply base of 2,000, we are enabling the purchasing organizations really to manage and to be supplier focused.
Yeah, and that's a long-term journey, especially on the direct material side, isn't it? Because you have so many of those suppliers' components designed into your end items. So it's not something that you can just, a change that you can make over 12 months. It's, maybe 5 or 6 years over the length of the program. Then when new programs come up, you start resourcing to some of your preferred suppliers instead.
Exactly, but you need to be extremely clear on who are your preferred supplier.
Yeah.
That's the reason why this grow, fix, exit strategy implemented in all the different categories has been one of the key for success. Because again, as you said, when you are in the supply base, you cannot exit it immediately, and you have to wait. So if on the way you change, then you never exit.
Yeah, and you have to have a long-term strategy, because you can't just decide you want to do it and do it next year, because it may take multiple years to be able to do that.
Exactly.
As you were looking at mapping out the technology infrastructure you needed to support the transformation, what are some of the things that you were looking for or perhaps prioritizing?
Well, first we somehow had a backbone, which was SAP.
Okay.
And to be also very frank with you, I mean, I don't know about the other companies, but our SAP master data was corrupted.
Right.
And so the first thing what we have to do, and you have to do, is to make sure you have something to rely on.
Yeah.
And if a buyer, again, don't know his spend, he has nothing to rely on.
No, it's so fundamental, but so something we struggle with so much is getting good data so we can actually make, realistic decisions, but also show up. Like when you show up with a stakeholder, you show up with bad data, the trust goes out of the window straight away, doesn't it?
So that was the first. We are using SAP as a backbone, and we decided to do a massive master data cleaning to have to give the ability to the buyer to take the right decision. So we based on that, and then somehow our SAP systems was a sum of entities, and so we didn't had one supplier number across the whole perimeter. Yeah. So I mean, the same supplier number could be a same supplier could have different suppliers in the different entities. Yeah. That's just impossible to manage that. Yeah. Consequently, this is where we entered into Ivalua, and we said now we want Ivalua to be our supplier master data. Okay. And so we cleaned up the whole master data, and now there is not even one supplier which is entering into the panel which doesn't go first into Ivalua.
Right. And so you have a single source of truth.
I have a single source, and there is nothing which is created in the master data in SAP without these flows going up front. So that was the basic for choosing Ivalua. Yeah. I have to say that for the rest, we have a best of breed approach. Means that we know that Ivalua is very strong in supplier relation management. Yeah. We are using them for that. I would say we had a very, very structured, as I said before, SAP management for direct purchasing. Yeah. And so then we put the P2P process of Ivalua in place for the spot buy and all the indirect purchasing. And I think this is what we've been doing. And then we've been choosing other tools like risk method, which is very good to master the risk of all your suppliers. I've been informed of things at the supplier, fire at the supplier, where even the sales guy was not informed yet.
Interesting. Yeah, that's pretty proactive.
So it's very proactive, and it helps us somehow to manage. You know that very recently Australia decided to, and all the OEM in Australia decided to quit. Yeah. Then we had a plant over there, and some suppliers still are over there, and they went into bankruptcy one after the other.
Yeah, because there's no industry to support them anymore.
So this is managed through a tool, and so we used best of breed approach, and we all connect all those tools to business intelligence tools, which is ClickSense, which help us to be connected to each of single tools and to give the buyer the whole range of information.
So they have a single dashboard from which to pull the information from the different sources that you use.
So performance, quality, delivery, every risk, everything is managed through this common platform.
What would be some of the tips that you would give for anybody listening in terms of cleansing your data? So, helping to make sure that the data that you're getting into the master data is actually usable data.
Well, I think the first tip is that you cannot ask everybody to be expert in everything. So you cannot ask somehow a buyer to be very good in strategy, to be a great negotiator, and also to be an expert in digitalizations and master data management. This guy, I have not found him yet.
Right.
I think it doesn't
You're searching
exist.
for a long time.
Yeah, I'm searching it for a long time. So the first tip I would say is separate, do really operational excellence. So do the right things to create value. So we have been separating sourcing and procurement.
Yeah.
And now we have the best people in procurement
Yeah.
and the best people in sourcing.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And if you want to clean up your master data, you cannot ask buyers to clean up your master data. So we separated. We have procurement center all around the globe. So we have procurement center in India, procurement centers in Europe, procurement centers in America, and they are the owner of the master data.
Right.
They are cleaning the master data, and they are securing the compliance of the database.
I'd love to also ask, with your background within finance, coming into procurement, you've obviously seen, you've had much more insight into accounts payable, accounts receivable, for example, for where a lot of the data originates that comes into procurement systems. I wonder if you could share some experiences of the importance of really purchasing or procurement and accounts payable actually working together to make sure the data that comes in is good data, or the data that's extracted from invoices is good data.
Well, I think this is where probably my background in finance helped me to have all the people realizing that, you buyer or you in your procurement, if you have master data or first too much suppliers, well, then you have too much invoices.
Yeah.
And you have too much master data. So I think the reduction of the supplier numbers is key, because again, you cannot manage into payables organizations different formats of invoices, because all those invoices need to be scanned and you have to recognize them. But if you have a supplier popping up every 2 single minutes, then it's additional job. So I think I understand very well what is the consequence of a corrupted master data to the payables, and this has to work together. Otherwise, it's not professional. And it's also why we wanted that is because Chassis Brakes has one of these value, trust. And how can you have the trust of your supplier base if you don't pay on time?
Yeah, that's, as a small business, I'm challenged with that every day. And
I can understand.
It's amazing. I think 80% of our invoices are paid late, and it is pretty crazy, across all the different industries we work with. But I love the comment about the supply reduction, because as a career procurement person, I've been in situations where I've heard my CFO, for example, talk about the need for supply reduction without necessarily articulating the reasons. And you think, well, why do we really need to do that? Does it make sense? Is it a strategy we should pursue? But the way you actually talked about from the finance perspective really makes sense, because you don't really, as a procurement person, think necessarily about the complexities of the data and the risks that come from managing so many different suppliers. What I'd love to move on to now, so you went through the transformation process. I'd love if you could just share a little bit more about what your current state is now. So what are some of the impacts of the changes that you made?
Well, the first impact, of course, has been already a reduction of 50% of the supply base. I'm insisting on that, but I think it's been a key for the transformations. Second impact is that we've been moving for a 30% PO coverage to 99% PO coverage. I think the no PO, no pay policy has been a strong move. But again, as our value is also trust, we didn't want to move it to a no PO, no pay policy before being clean ourselves in the way we are managing the suppliers. So we moved it somehow not immediately. Now it's in place everywhere in all the regions. So this is one of the status. And also, I would say that now 100% of the spend is known by the purchase guys. So they know to which extent and to which magnitude or they are where they are buying. We have an information systems which allow us to know somehow the day after when a PO is placed to
it's real
somebody.
time spending.
It's real time spending. And also, there is only 2 guys in my organization approving any supplier entering into the panel.
Right.
So I think we are coming to a level where we have control, and we know what we buy.
Yeah.
And by this, I have to say that it has been increasing somehow the value of year-over-year purchasing somehow by half a point.
Right.
So half a point for chassis brakes is close to somehow 5 to somehow
it's a big impact on the
5 to
bottom
6
line.
million euro year-over-year savings, which is a significant impact. And on indirect, I have to say that with close to 10,000 suppliers moving them for 4,000, it's probably more than 10% savings year-over-year. And just by the fact that when we enter in 2015, we thought we had 100 million of indirect spend. In fact, what we had 200. So imagine that there is 100 million that is just known by nobody and not controlled by anybody. So just taking in few figures, 100 million, you can easily say that there is probably 10 million out of it, which could be somehow saved.
Yeah, and in 2015, at what, $800 million euros of revenue, that's a big percentage of total revenue for the company that you didn't necessarily have insights into.
And so, our company is growing.
Yeah.
We will be 2 billion soon.
Yeah.
We are on our way on organic growth by 1.5. We are still planning to acquire maybe a piece of business.
Yeah.
To be able to acquire some business, you need to be strong on your procurement activities. Otherwise,
we have a great platform to build from as well.
Exactly, and then when you grow, you have more power, and so you can easily understand that a company that will multiply its turnover by 2 and its spend by 2, and in the meantime will divide his supply base by 2 or more, the happy few staying with chassis brakes on the panel of chassis brake will see their turnover increasing, and this is a basic strategy: additional growth for them against additional productivity for us.
Yeah. Now I got a couple of questions just to follow up. One was, you talked about the fact that you now have 100% insight into where the spend is. How does that translate into, you don't necessarily want to take action on all that spend, because I'm sure, as many other organizations, you don't have the depth of capabilities, just the breadth of folks in your team to be able to do that. How does that inform where you focus as a procurement team?
Well, first, when you discover the magnitude, I would say let's talk about indirect spend. Yeah. As I said, direct spend is more controlled. Yeah. If you talk about the indirect spend, and when you first discover that the magnitude of your transactions, you have to understand how much spent per supplier per year, how much transactions for this spend, and you discover that probably, and this is the case for chassis brakes, 90% of the indirect suppliers have less than probably 10,000 euros spent per year with 2 or 3 transactions. Right. And this is somehow a different management than probably the 20% of the spend, where you will have somehow some strategies, some sourcing, some consolidations. So. And it's two different animals, 2 different ways of managing.
Tail spend versus the strategic spend.
And so managing the tail, it's about catalogs, it's about putting in place Amazon, it's about marketplace, it's about PSP, it's about all that. While managing the big suppliers, it's just closer to what is direct purchasing, sourcing. Sourcing committee, and etc.
Category strategies.
So again, the big value out of it is also to be able to split the resources to where they are good at. Yeah. And that's also, and be a little bit more focused on what really create value. And this is what we've been doing. So that's a big discovery when we were able to really to understand what the data.
So what's next then on the transformation journey?
Well, I would say first keeping on improving all the transactional, because again, purchasing, it's about transactions. And we are still not where we want to be in managing the transactions. So the speed of the transactions. Cycle times. So it's just like a manufacturing plant. You have procurement centers and you should manage them on cycle time, number of invoice treated, number of PO treated. Yeah. So I think we are not where we want, but at least we have the KPIs to improve.
Yeah.
And then I would say keeping on taking our strategy of best of breed and bringing more value for chassis brakes. I think somehow we are not at the end, but we are now in a continuous improvement mode. And we want to do right what we have for the moment, and this is what we're going to do in the next 2 years. After, if there is a brilliant solution from Ivalua coming, then I will be happy to look at it.
By all means, we'll take a look at it.
But I think now I would say we are structured for performance.
Yeah.
And now I'm expecting from all my teams to perform to requirement.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your transformation journey with me, Cyrille. I really appreciate your time. Lots of great insights there for Art of Procurement listeners. So for anyone who is listening to the show, you check out the show notes. I'll include links to Chassis Brakes International so folks can learn a little bit more about your journey as an organization. And that'll be at artofprocurement.com. So that's artofprocurement.com. And Cyrille, one last time, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, I want to thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. You can check out all of our back catalogue at artofprocurement.com/podcast, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's show, I'd love if you would tell a peer, or perhaps go and rate and review by going to artofprocurement.com/review. Word of mouth really is the best way to help the podcast grow, and if you're able to do either one of those things, I would truly appreciate it.